It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hogsty Network, the show where we examine, pick apart, look at, sift through, dumpster dive into the world of sports media, business, industrial complex, the Crystal City on the hill. Steve, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. Thank you for asking. I don't think we've recorded since I put my big health scare column out 2 weeks ago. I don't think.
No, I don't
So
believe so.
yeah, so everybody, I'm not going to reiterate all that here because I've said what I was going to say. But everybody, please go read that. And for those wondering and asking, I feel fine currently, and it's kind of a matter of going forward sort of thing. But I got a whole bunch of comments about it, and I appreciate all the thoughts.
Well, don't think we're going to take it easy on the top level stories here, Steve.
Well, I hope not.
Puppies and ducklings.
Don't treat me like a weakling.
That's right. We're going to go right at it.
Come at me, bro.
All right. So first up, obviously, if we want to play hardball, if we want to be in the big leagues, if we want to be talking about what everybody wants and is talking about, and more importantly, paying for and paying to interact with, it is the National Football League. And they gave some tidbits out, and if you step back and rub your eyes and, get out of, don't do your 730th mock draft, you can start to see what the NFL is doing with the calendar year and really becoming a 12-month sports entertainment property. Steve, what was the little bit of data they released this week, and then we can build a bigger picture?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I've actually done 0 mock drafts this year, believe it or not. Well, it's like I don't know what team. I don't have a team anymore. It doesn't. The Redskins are gone. I don't know. I don't know what team. I don't have any rooting interest in any of the teams. So it's. Yeah, I don't know. Have you? How many? Have you done a bunch of mock drafts?
No.
Yeah. See, you don't either. Because you're.
I'm an adult. I'm an adult 50-year-old man.
Yes.
Enough already.
Okay. Of course, now I can't find it, Chris. See, this is partly why I'm vamping here. Okay, well, what they've done is they've changed number one, they've changed the schedule release around to give sort of a dribble of, opening day games and important games. And they're building a bunch of content around it, okay? And they're also delaying it later in May. It's usually been in May, but this year it's the latest it's ever been in late May. And if I could ever find the article that Chris and I found, I would tell you the exact date. But again, it's escaping my fingers. Okay. So, but what they're doing here, like Chris said, the trick here is 12 months a year. If you notice, the NFL has something every month. February, it's the scouting combine. March, the players, come back and report. Free agency, and then the players report. April's the draft. May, schedule release. June is the one thing they haven't found something for, but give them time.
Well, it's free agency too. It's the post-June 1st release.
There you go.
Yep.
That's
there
not
is a whole little... No, but it's active.
Yeah. And then July is training camp, and here we're into the season. So it's not an accident, and it's by design that the NFL scheduled the schedule release. They built a big program around, because you know what they could do? They could just do a press release. Here's the schedule. They don't need to have NFL Network, giant NFL Network party, but they're doing that to try to create an event. And that's a marketing thing. Your thoughts?
Well, one, it will, so get your save the dates ready, get your venue, start doing your pre-shopping, pick your menu out, invite your friends, because the first couple games will be released on May 9th. So get all your big plans ready for, the social event of the year, the highlight game schedule release on May 9th. So be ready for that, everybody. Yeah, this is ridiculous. They're doing well. We sit here and record the week before draft weekend. So by the time you listen to this, the draft will be reaching its fever pitch towards Thursday night. And they're actually doing something very similar here. For those of you that remember, the draft actually just used to be 2 days, Saturday and Sunday, and when they had more rounds, by the way. So we already seen how we've scraped this across 3 or 4 days, the first round. So that's what they're doing here. They're giving you a scheduled rollout, right? We're going to hear about the opening games and maybe the prime time schedules and whatever that is, and then we're going to give you the whole schedule. So they're stretching that just like they stretched the draft over really the last 10 or 12 years. And it really is remarkable. You could make the case that the only true dark time in the NFL is probably from about mid to late June to mid to late July, and then camps start to open. That's, so book your vacations there, NFL staff.
Well, and that's the times I've been in the building when that have been empty. It's been June. No other time. They're actually working. But yeah, you can tell this is like the brainchild of a bunch of marketing guys in New York and in NFL headquarters. And okay, what can we do? How about let's stretch out the schedule release and create a big block of programming, because they're also featuring a bunch of programming around it. And like you said, the key games come out like 2 weeks early, and it's a dribble, and ooh, let's talk about it. It's the Cowboys and the Giants, opening day, and we can analyze that game and all that. And I think it seems to me that if they're going to do this, we're only going to from now on feature prominent like Super Bowl caliber teams on the opening day, and these key couple games will only be that you're not going to get like Washington and the Jets, on those games. You're going to get it's a maximize the marketing and eyeballs kind of opportunity, and the NFL is good at this.
Oh, they're excellent at it. And that's exactly, get to know it's going to be Patriots, Steelers, Cowboys, Packers, and maybe the Raiders, more and more, just because like sort of how big they've gone, and just the entertainment West Coast aspect of it. The other big news, if we think about how the NFL is just sharpening its elbows and trying to own every piece of sports entertainment real estate it can get its hands on, is they announced, I think just a day or two ago, that they're going to be this year putting 3 games on Christmas Day, which is, the NBA has owned Christmas Day for probably going on 20, 25 years. They've really established a whole viewing day around that. I think they play sometimes there's many as 4 or 5 games on, from basically 11:30 a.m. Eastern time to 11 p.m. Western time. So, and they're going right at that. I mean, is there any part of the sports mind share the NFL doesn't want or doesn't care about?
Yeah, I think the NBA will be immensely unhappy at this. Because for those of you who don't understand this, I know there's a bunch of basketball fans out there. The NFL slaughters the NBA in ratings. When they go head to head, it's like NBA championship games get beaten by regular Sunday games by a lot. It's not close. Now this year, I think the real trick, Chris, will be next year, and maybe 2 years from now, because this year Christmas happens to fall on a Sunday. And so the NBA, or the NFL rather, almost couldn't avoid having some games on Christmas Day, because otherwise, they're totally changing kind of their pattern and their history for no reason. It looks like they're afraid, of the NBA. So I don't know if this is nearly as much of a, huge step as it may appear. I'm frankly surprised they don't have more games, on Sunday other than just 3. But I think the trick will be going forward, when next couple years and Christmas isn't on a Sunday, will there be games?
Yeah, I think, is this a calendar schedule anomaly, or is this, or is it a test run? Because if they kill, right, and they can kind of use that excuse and that reasoning if they need to placate the NBA for this year. But if those games kill, which, just if the past is prologue, they will. So then the NFL is going to be okay. So how do we stretch this out a little bit? Well, the NFL really can own the calendar from Thursday night to Monday night. So because they can sneak a game on a Saturday. They do it already. So that's basically 4 nights. So when Christmas falls within that range, do they just say, we always have games, right? So you can see the playing field, and if they've got Cowboys, Steelers. I don't know if they play that division this year, so I can't. That's that. So let's do it. Let's say they got San Francisco versus Las Vegas, or if they have Cowboys versus Green Bay, or something along those lines, right? It will have huge numbers, and the NFL will want that Thursday night, Saturday afternoon, evening, Sunday afternoon, evening, and Monday night.
Oh, and again, it's almost a guarantee it's going to slaughter the NBA. Slaughter them. There's no doubt. There's no doubt about it. And yeah, I think that'll, no matter who they put out there, the NBA, it's going to get beat. You could have a repeat of the NBA Finals, and it will not matter. It just absolutely 100% will not matter. I do tend to think it's a bit of a scheduling anomaly. I mean, I realize we just talked about how they're geniuses in marketing, but I just don't know how they could avoid this. That's the thing. I mean, I don't know how you don't have Sunday games unless you schedule the whole season to end before Christmas, and that ended 20 years ago. So I think I tend to think it's a bit of an anomaly. We'll see. I think the part of the key is when are the games going to be scheduled? The NBA starts at like noon, I think, Eastern time,
Yeah,
something like
early.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it may be an hour before if the NFL does normal afternoon, late afternoon, evening game, it may blot out all but the beginning of the NBA games in terms of ratings.
I have such a great in comedy they call it a callback. But what's interesting to me here, right? So is what games they schedule or highlight. Do they still play Sunday night? Right? Because they could easily take a Sunday night off. Like if that was like a nod to the NBA, that's something they could easily do schedule wise. And then from there, if we get a game, what happens next year? But and then who they did put on those games? Is it a B game, an interdivisional game, or something that will have interest and still win? Because they have to win in the ratings by a certain margin. We're not talking about beat. We're talking about if they beat them within a range of kind of normal, then they'll go, okay, maybe it's not worth taking the NBA on this. But if they go above some kind of line, they probably have in their heads, and it performs over that, then all bets are off. So where does this call back to? The schedule release. Because if we see what games they do on Sunday, who they going to put on Sunday night, if we see how they handle that day schedule wise, then that'll be a little bit of a test about how aggressive they are.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And listen, the NFL in the legal world and in the marketing world is ultra aggressive. I don't think they're going to give the NBA any quarter at all. I think they're going to probably still have a Sunday night game. And it's going to be some two top teams, and they're going to throw it right in the NBA's face. I think that is what's going to happen because the NFL has a history of that in almost every respect. They act like the 800-pound gorilla in every way. Now they've lost some legal battles over the past several years, and that's a whole nother topic. But they always are aggressive about it. So I would anticipate no quarter given. And then they're gonna put the best teams on Sunday night. The only way that I think they avoid a night game is if that's the last week of the season. But with the new 18-game season, I don't see
No,
how
it's
that could
almost
possibly
no.
be.
I think yes. Last year, I think because I even was, when you're sort of attuned to a certain schedule for most of your adult life and child life to a degree, you're kind of attuned to it. So last year, it felt longer past Christmas. You're like, wow, you look at the Christmas weekend, and usually you're like a week away or week out, or maybe even wrapping up, and then it was like, oh, there's still like 2 to 3 games after Christmas at that point.
Yeah, well, and they do have a limit on the other side because I don't think they want the Super Bowl on President's Day weekend because it's a holiday weekend. They don't want that, to have their big marquee game being on a holiday weekend when people are possibly traveling. And so as long as they can not hit that, and probably Valentine's Day weekend too. So if Valentine's Day falls on a weekend, so I think that's partly where they're gonna how they're gonna start the season to end up like that. So I'm trying to figure out when. Let's see, President's Day. Let's find out, shall we? President's Day 2023. Okay, so that's February 20th, and then Valentine's Day. We can look that up too. Valentine's Day. Okay, Valentine's Day is on a Tuesday, so that's not an issue. So the NFL could extend things out a little bit, but they would want to finish on the weekend before. So they'd want to finish by the 12th. So count 18 weeks back from that. That's when you're going to start, and then that's the week that it's going to be for Christmas.
Well, there you go. So we see a couple power moves in the last week as they go into one of the biggest flex non-game based flex they have all year, which is this draft weekend.
But it is kind of interesting how from the schedule release, if you go back 10 years even, there was no event for schedule release. The NFL
if you go back 4 years.
Yeah, maybe it's been short. Yeah, maybe I'm not remembering it right. But yeah, you go back however many years, not too long ago, unless you're 12, in which case it's a very long time ago. But there was no event at all. All of a sudden, it's just the teams had the schedule, and that was it. And then we slowly went from that to a little bit bigger to a little bit bigger, and now it's like, they have hours of programming a day, on it. And frankly, I get a little tired of it. I wish you just, I may be an anachronism, but I wish they just release a schedule. I don't really need to have, they've got, analysis of the key games, and, ESPN does it. Isn't this normally on ESPN?
Yeah.
I think so.
I think so.
Yeah, I can't remember. It's either on the ESPN or NFL Network. But point is, they've got like game level in-depth analysis. This is what the Cowboys need to do to win the game. And we keep mentioning the Cowboys because I know we're kind of Washington heavy. Listen, the fact of the matter is the Cowboys are by far the most popular team in football. They get the best ratings by far. As obnoxious as Jerry Jones is, it is a marketing dream. And that's why you always see Dallas on all these kind of key games, as much as it bothers Washington fans. But anyway, it's kind of, I find it interesting how much this event has grown, and how, like you said, to start this little segment, how they've really intentionally placed this in a dead spot in the calendar, because the NFL's had a strategy for years that I've read about to have an event every month, and they haven't figured out June. Give them time. Something will happen in June. The next thing, whatever it is, will be June. I can almost promise you. I don't know what it is, but something will come in June.
There's a lot of free agents still out there. If you look at everyone's like top 100 free agents as we head into it, I think in some cases, I think it's like close to 50% of those free agents are still there.
Well, I mean, you mentioned that before the show, Chris, that, June free agency, it is a dead spot. If you go into building, because I've been in an NFL building, and in June it is dead. That's the only time the coaches take off. That's the only time nobody but a handful of players who live in the area are working out. That's the only time it's truly dead. The front office is there because they can't get a day off. But from a football side, all the coaches, that's their dead time. And again, don't feel sorry for them, because when we say dead time, they're working sort of regular hours during the rest of the, it's not like an in-season 12-hour, 13-hour day. But still, I just think at some point the NFL is going to dream up some marketing event, and it's going to be in June.
And then they get lucky, right? And what I mean by that is, now, this is a slow trend that's sort of now caught fire, and it's another thing where they're taking on the NBA, is trades are back, baby, in the NFL. Like, the trades are a thing. You can't deny that. Like, we've seen, more trades over the last 10 years, if you kind of just look at those kind of trends. And then 2-3 years ago, they just take a big hockey stick up. The Debo Samuel's just like whatever time of our recording is like a 48 hours, just 48, maybe 72 hours ago. That whole thing blew up. Kadarius Toney announced that he wants to be traded. I mean, it's like also like there's like constant trades going on. So that's not even something that the NFL can necessarily manufacture, but they just get lucky.
Well, part of that is the NFL players trying to take more control over the league. If like for example, the NBA is run by the players, right? The owners are basically a bunch of cowards, and so they kowtow to all the whims of people like LeBron James, and I want this guy and this coach and all that, and happily and humorously it blew up in LeBron's face, for the Lakers this year. But part of this, see, years ago, NFL players never did that. It was huge news if somebody demanded a trade. Nobody had a guaranteed contract. Now what do we have? A dude who's been accused of sexual misconduct by 22 women getting a fully guaranteed $100 million contract, and you have a bunch of people demanding trades and teams actually entertaining him. Because before, even if they demanded it, nobody would entertain him. They just shrug their shoulders, and then the player would sit out training camp, and then he'd come back. But nowadays, teams are actually trying to accommodate this. Now, Debo, I haven't seen any real, action as a result of his his demand, but we'll see. But I think it's sort of an interesting dynamic of the players attempting to gain more control than they've had.
Of course, and power to them. But this is why it's such a lucky, or the breaks will always be fortuitous towards the NFL. The players can do that, and they may, in fact, have stretched out a little bit of breathing room. But the economics of football will never allow that to happen. What happens in the NBA? Just too many players. It's just so they have a very strong firewall. The NFL, so they can, and they might lose a little ground. The players may gain a little ground. You might get a little bit of this kind of player-driven stuff. Yes, that will come in, and it won't be, but it won't get to where it disrupts any of the economies, and it just creates more excitement. So if it stays within that safe zone, then it's just another way in which we keep talking about this. Because one thing we haven't mentioned, we talk about the NFL and its marketing dominance and all that we just said, but it's an ecosystem. So everybody eats, right? Like these things help the local sports radio. They help things like the Hogsty. They help the whole, the networks, even at the big top media things. It gives them stuff to talk about, because just the way you say the games perform in the ratings, so does the conversation, so does the content, so does the hits, so does the advertising dollars. All of that, it really is a lifts all boats scenario. So that's another reason most of these content mills, and I say that in the most broad and generous way, they want this too, and they do better when we're talking about this.
Oh, listen, even on the Hogsty, we'd rather have controversy, no controversy, because, it gives us something to talk about. But also, I think another factor in this is that the NFL is truly a collective, unlike baseball, unlike basketball. I mean, the NFL is something that Karl Marx would be proud of. It's revenue sharing almost equally, with the exception of some local marketing revenue. Whereas the NBA, there's haves and have-nots in the NBA. There's really haves or have-nots in baseball. You compare the Dodgers, Yankees, Cubs, Red Sox to the Marlins and the Tampa Bay Rays and the Pirates and some others. There's no comparison. In the NBA, it's kind of that way too. We'll get to this later in the show, but Golden State Warriors, I think their revenue was $400 million, I think, a year. I think is what it was. The net revenue. But I can promise you that smaller teams is not anywhere close to that. Whereas the NFL, it's about the same. And so what comes with that, I think, also is more strength in ownership to face off against these players and not let them take more or grab more influence that they have in other leagues, because the owners are much more united in the NFL than they are in other places.
For sure. And that's a good transition, Steve, because let's talk about how some of these other leagues are going to handle this, right? So we see the power move, right? You see the board of risk or Monopoly or whatever tabletop strategy game metaphor you want to use. What do the other leagues do? So one, we looked at an interesting article this week in The Athletic about the NHL strategy, or maybe their emerging strategy, or maybe where they're starting to experiment, and that is with basically international expansion into Europe and really Northern Europe and Central Europe specifically. And is this where they have to grow? Is this where they have a sliver, or maybe actually a little bit more of a chunked advantage against a league like the NFL, and markets the NFL doesn't even want to be in? How does the NHL get theirs? So, Steve, what is the sort of spark for this?
Okay, well, a couple players are driving this. So, and Chris, you're gonna have to help me because I don't know any of these players. The Nashville Predators have a player, Roman Josi, if that's how you pronounce his name. He went to the team, meaning the Predators, and has gone to the team and has wanted a game in his home country, which is somewhere in Northern Europe. It doesn't say. And then the New Jersey Devils have somebody, Nico Heischer, who wanted to go have a game in Switzerland. Though that's the driving force behind it. And there's, I think there's one other player in here too. Here's the thing. I think the NHL has a much better chance of growing internationally than does their big richer brother, the NFL. The NFL's tried to do this for 10 years at least with the London games. And while the London games are doing okay, it's never really taken hold. NFL Europe failed. Hockey is something that's played in a wide variety of places around the world. Again, Roman Josi, he's from somewhere up there, Sweden, Switzerland, somewhere. And the other guy, Heischer. And there's a whole bunch of Russians in the NHL. For obvious political reasons, I don't think they're going to Russia anytime soon. But point is, I think the sport of hockey is popular in these in these countries, in these Northern European countries, and some other places, whereas nobody plays football, but in America, and then in a little bit in Germany. So I think actually the NHL has an opportunity to grow here that perhaps football doesn't have.
Josie's from the Czech Republic. Yeah, you're talking. Well, first of all, the interesting part here is that the league already looks like this. As you're saying, some of the players are agitating and driving and advocating for this. It's because the league looks like this. The league is Russian. The league is Swedish. The league is from Finland. The league is from the Czech Republic and a bunch of Eastern European countries. And they all have their own pro leagues, right? So there already is a minor league system. There's already audiences for professional hockey. International hockey isn't quite obviously at the soccer level, but does have, some cachet as well. The Olympics are arguably bigger for hockey than they are for soccer, at least, especially in the men's. So lots of interesting international roots. So this is a leverage point on a couple different ways. I think the NHL is super smart. Also, the other advantage that, quite frankly, all three of the other sports have against football, just in terms of logistics of doing international scheduling, is that a series-based league can pull this off, right? Because you can carve off a couple teams. Maybe you set of 6 teams, they do a couple series, or you weave in series. That's a lot easier to schedule the travel, those kind of things, than you are the one-off leagues like the NFL. Also just smaller to travel anyway in general. So I think it makes a ton of sense. I think, in fact, I've noticed a pretty steep decline in interest in the New Year's Day live game. It's just sort of when things have kind of gotten saturated or old. I think, imagine something in Finland or Sweden, in the middle of winter. You could, you almost make it like a little bit of a mini Olympics. You do some of like the profile, and you're in some sleeping, European town. There's a lot of fun things they could do with that, from a TV presentation standpoint as well. So I think what you're seeing is these other leagues just sort of reading the room. What of the scraps are we going to feed on, and what can we carve out that's going to be sustainable for us and allow us some platform to growth? It's all about, what part of the market can we still get?
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, the story for this is with The Athletic. Sean Shapiro, dated March 22. The business of the NHL Global Series and the league's push for international brand recognition is the name. And Roman Josie's from Switzerland, so he's pushing for a game in Switzerland. But again, there's lots of other players, and I just don't think the NFL is going to succeed. And I thought you had a good point. Whereas I think the NHL will succeed. You have a good point about the series versus one-off games because it's hard to justify flying a team 12 hours across the ocean for one little game and then turn immediately around and fly home. That is tough. But I think the NHL. I don't know. You have to tell me, Chris. The NHL certainly wants to be the preeminent hockey league in the world. I don't know if they are, because again, I know there's a big Russian league. There's leagues in these Euro countries, these Northern European countries. For like soccer, I think there's a U.S. I know there's a U.S. soccer league that nobody cares about. The Premier League is the Premier League. I don't know where the NHL falls in the hierarchy. Do you?
I think it's definitely still the top of the food chain. I mean, and if you need a clearest data point over the last 20 plus years, and then kind of an acute focus on it in the last 6 months, is the Russian players. They still want to play in the NHL. Now you might I think it's the Russian Dynamo League, and I think they actually have a few. There probably is your second best international hockey league, country based. But the only Russian players that ever do that are guys at the sort of tail end of their career who can bilk another NHL contract or two if they, kind of hint in the olden days, if they hinted that they would go play in the Russian Dynamo League or whatever. And, and a couple guys that, when they did wash out of the NHL, that was a great plan B. So, but NHL is still the top of the food chain. And I would, with the, not that we should, minimize what's going on in Russia, Ukraine to its impact on international hockey, but that might be gone forever, forever if you mark it in like 20-year chunks. So, the NHL is the definite tops of the food chain. And
I was going to bring that up, because the sanctions against Russia aren't going away anytime soon. That does, to the extent that there's any marketing opportunity for Russian hockey at all, one, that's totally gone. And two, a lot of those players are going to want to get out. Out of there, because financially and economically, it's not a good bet anymore. So I think it will cause a greater exodus of Russian players to the United States.
Yeah, and you've seen how careful the Russian players that are active, including Alexander Ovechkin in the NHL, have been, tiptoeing, through the tulips on this, pretty carefully. And they're not.
Ovechkin in particular has expressly supported Russia in some cases.
In the past, he hasn't since it broke out. Yes.
Yes.
No, he was like, Putin's sports czar type of deal. And,
yes.
Yes, of course. So, but then they're not rushing back and they're not opening their mouths, right? So there's another, kind of vote with their feet type of evidence about the Russian professional hockey in Russia is not coming back anytime soon. And there wasn't any other threat to the NHL along those lines. And the NHL already lets, whether it's the Olympics or international competition, they already are open and welcome to that. So you're not just, just like soccer, especially in a European context, those players play in all kinds of different high-end leagues and then go back to their country for the international things. And that is the same operating system in hockey. So,
well, I mean, in the case of these Russian players also, it may be that they're afraid for their families inside of Russia.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, it's not just finances. Sure.
I mean, because their families may get a visit from Boris.
Yeah.
If they speak out too much, and obviously they don't want to happen. And that's the same thing that happens in China. Don't forget who, Russia is. It's a, murdering dictatorship. So
the funny thing is, I'd say 5 years might be pushing it. But if we were talking about this story, let's call it 6, 7, 10 years ago, we'd be talking about series in Russia.
Yes.
Like that would be the obvious market, so that's actually the super interesting thing. That would be where all this was based. They'd take 6 teams, crisscross their series and park them in Russia, doing a little barnstorming across, Petersburg, Moscow type of thing. And that's what we'd be talking about. And it'd be Ovechkin, it'd be Malkin, you'd get those teams, and you'd have 2 months of the NHL in Russia.
And you might see some NHL teams playing exhibition games against Russian teams. Yeah, 100%. And clearly for political reasons, that's totally out the window. Obviously now. So I think we're going to see more of this because I think again, the fan base is there, the players have ties there. Whereas the NFL, I mean, I think you've been in Great Britain in the past couple years. I haven't been there in several years now.
Yeah.
Um, I've always got the sense that the British kind of humor us in our football stuff, and it's important as kind of an event on the day it happens. But I don't think there's too many people not named Mark Bullock who are obsessing over football over there. Real football, not girly football, soccer.
So the times that I've been actually did almost always map to the NFL's weekend in London, or just after it or before it. So I actually got to see it. What it's like, and it's genuine or whatever. Here's what I would equate it to. It's like how Americans celebrate St. Patrick's Day. It's like, and it's the thing, you're in America and it's harder to see these things. You go on the other side, you say, oh, that's really interesting because it's like a celebrate dumb America day. Really, football and like the big celebrities and a little bit of, like kind of an event and kind of you be cheeky and you wear your jersey just like people wear stupid green hats, and whatever American city you're in from corner to corner on
Yeah, it's
dumbass St.
Yankee
Patrick's
Day.
Day.
Today's
Yeah,
Yankee
exactly.
Day. Yeah.
That's what it is. And, and then if you do that over time, and there's enough international travel and stuff. So there is obviously some real fans, but what's stuck in a place like London is that kind of event Yankee Day type of vibe.
Because nobody cares about the Irish here for St. Patrick's Day. It's an excuse to party and drink and green.
Right.
And
Cinco de Mayo is the exact same thing.
Right. It's not a celebration of culture or whatever. I mean, it is for a small handful, but the NHL doesn't need to have a gimmick like that. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because you have all these players who are from all over the place. So I think, and the NHL, just generally speaking, I think has got a bigger market share. We've talked about their TV contracts, in recent years, how they've gone from nothing to prime time to network, all of that. In the NHL's in Vegas, and that team's gets a lot of attention, and there are cities like Nashville where the NHL is performing very well. So I think the NHL is growing in market share. They know that. They know they're never going to be the NFL in America, but I think they can increase their profits by increasing their international play in a way that the NFL just can never do.
Whether it's ESPN or TNT or who's got the rights, the broadcast, I think ABC now for broadcast. I'm going to give you a free tip. So if there's any, TV executives from any of those places that are putting TV, NHL and American TV, do an outside series in January in Finland. Be amazing. I mean, just recreate the freaking North Pole, sometime around, sometime from December 15th to January 15th and do outside games there. It'd be huge.
Oh, it'd be great. Yeah. Absolutely. And again, baseball can't do that, right? Basketball, to a limited extent, more limited extent, is the other one that is played a lot internationally. So basketball can maybe make some inroads, but the NFL can't. The NFL's not going to go play in Finland, or anywhere else. So I think that'd be great. And send checks to Chris Larry, courtesy of the Hog Sky, for the idea. He was wanting a contingent fee. We have a contract.
There we go. So speaking of expansion into other entertainment properties, different kinds of contracts, different kinds of brands. Steve already mentioned this a little bit. Another callback for you is that the Golden State Warriors, it's going to be, the Golden State Warriors production arm, for lack of a better term. So basically they want to get into producing documentaries, movies, content of all kinds built in and around the Golden State Warriors brand.
Yeah, the story for this is on CNBC. Our old friend Jabari Young. We're gonna have to get him on the show one of these days.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I'll try. I'll try to do that. NBA's Golden State Warriors step into movies, music, and events with a new entertainment division. I gotta admit, I don't understand this one at all. I really don't. I mean, I understand what they're trying to do. I'm not sure how smart this is. So what we're talking about here is this. The Warriors are going to put an entire entertainment division together that is a culture centered, not necessarily basketball centered. They've already signed some K-pop star I've never heard of, Bam Bam, to this thing. I don't ask me who it is. My paralegal is all into K-pop. She would probably know. I'll have to ask her who Bam Bam is. But and he's Thai and he's based in South Korea. But they're talking about movies, music, cultural events. This article cites the Last Dance, which was the Michael Jordan documentary, as being kind of a revelation for Golden State. But I don't know, man. And this is the article, by the way, that said their net income is 400 million a year. I don't really get this. I don't know if there's a market big enough for the Golden State Warriors. They were talking about signing players, having some players do things, but apparently there's a provision in the NBA's collective bargaining agreement that prevents this, that prevents them from signing contracts with teams outside of the NBA's marketing arm, and so they have to wait till Steph Curry retires to sign him to do things like this. So by that time, not that people forget about him, but he's not the prominent player anymore. So I don't. I know what they're trying to do, but I kind of question whether this is going to be successful.
This is like considering yourself smart to see which way the weather vane points in a hurricane.
Yeah.
So at some macro level, yes, of course we need to expand our business. Of course there's leverage points that we could do. Of course we have properties that we could try to be, what the cool kids are doing in new media. And then absolutely pancaking it. And, I'm submitting this as my resume. Entertainment broadcast companies, please hire me, because I could have told you that something like CNN Plus was stupid. I could have told you that Quibi was stupid. And this to me is just in line with this kind of high on their own supply hubris that makes these kind of ridiculous billion-dollar business decisions. They don't even have, as Steve just said, their own assets in order here to line up to do this well, in terms of just, Curry. So this makes no sense. First of all, have a hit first, right? That's what you'd say to a CNN Plus launches, doesn't even have a show. There's no momentum towards it. What's the hit, Golden State Warriors? When this stuff does well, you have a hit first. Do this quietly. If you wanted to produce something, produce it. And if it's successful, you build from there. You can't tell me that you're going to come out with the K-pop and the documentaries. You're years behind old good ideas. No one wants to see the Last Dance. Was surprising. It was interesting. It was well done. That's why people watched it. You can't recreate a 7-year-old success when you're going against Michael Jordan and the Bulls versus today's NBA. It's like got loser written all over it. No part of this will work.
You were much more honest about it than I was, because that was what was going through my head. I just didn't articulate it quite as well as you did, because the CNN Plus thing is a perfect example. So it's a bunch of marketing executives in Atlanta, and what can we do to make more money? Our ratings are tanking. We get slaughtered in the ratings, and we can talk about why. It doesn't matter. It's another show, but they are getting slaughtered. Well, let's make people pay for it. Let's put our best content on a service that we're going to make people pay $15 a month for when they're not watching in the first place. That'll certainly drive them to our content.
It's worse. It's worse, Steve. And it's actually exactly analogous to this, because it's worse because they didn't put their best content there. The best content is still on regular CNN. So there's even less. So if you want to watch CNN, point. You can just watch CNN. There's literally nothing there. And that's the same thing here. You want Golden State content without Steph Curry? What?
Yeah, what content are they going to produce without Steph Curry? Exactly. Yes. You could argue like another team, like maybe the Lakers or the Celtics could do this in a way. If you have enough, trot Magic Johnson and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, he's the most non-charismatic person ever. But you get my point. The Celtics, trot Larry Bird out, and you could produce a documentary or two. I wholeheartedly agree with your marketing strategy with this thing. You don't just announce a giant thing, because it's just gonna fail horribly. It's gonna be a spectacular bust. But yeah, if you started quietly, produce a documentary about the history of the Golden State Warriors and have Curry host it.
Yeah,
because they do have some interesting stuff in their background, and maybe some people would watch it, But no, we've got to go CNN Plus from the beginning. Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Yeah, I find it hysterical.
But again, I think other teams could do this. I mean, the Lakers are a mismanaged mess, but if you had competent management with the Lakers, they have enough real major stars hanging around. Maybe you could do this quietly and it would kind of work. Like Winning Time, I watched. Chris harangued me. I did watch Winning Time of the past 2 weeks. I watched all 7. I think we're up to 7, right?
Yeah, I think it might. There's 2 more, 3 more for the season.
Okay, well, I've watched 7 of however many there. I've watched 7 of them. Very well done. Very entertaining. It's got some production tricks that I think are unique. There's a lot of fourth wall in this, which is interesting. The way it's filmed has a look of aged film from the 70s. It's a very, very well done. The guy who they got to play Magic Johnson is, my goodness, it could be his twin brother. He's not
Totally.
as production tip here. So that guy is 6'3", and then the guy who they got to play Kareem, who also looks a lot like him, is like 6'5", 6'6". So they're like a whole half a foot shorter. So if you notice, they've got a bunch of short people playing other players. The camera angles are a lot of times away down. They're really trying to hide the fact that this kid is not. He's not a kid. This guy is 6 inches shorter than Magic. But anyway, Winning Time. You were 100% right, Chris. I'm glad I watched it. It didn't irritate me like the NBA does today. I find it fascinating. Learned stuff I didn't know about the team. I'd never heard of Jack McKinney, to be honest. Never heard of him. And now I know. So anyway, so I thank you for that. But in terms of the Warriors, I think it's going to be it's going to be a spectacular failure of epic proportions.
I just given away so many pearls today. But this is what you had done. You said it's a good idea, right? Like I said, the weather vane, 75-mile-an-hour winds, you can see which way the weather vane's going, right? Okay. So what if we did, we have enough money, we can carve out, you can have like a little special projects, you can hire the consultants, you can bring someone on staff, you can do all that. No, you have the money to do this. You can bankroll whatever idea. What if we did a 5-part history of the history of basketball in California? College, pros, like the story of basketball in California. And,
the story of the Warriors. Start small.
Right.
Isn't Bill Walton a Warrior? It wasn't Bill Walton a Warrior?
Yeah, I think so.
I bet they've had some big players and some things happen. Just start there. Because I think that the history of basketball in California would be the Lakers and UCLA, which they probably don't want to do. But
yeah, but you could do both, or you could pick one. There could be all kinds of strategic decisions. Right. All that's just like, what flavor of the cake do we want, really? Just do something like that. It would be so easy to do. They just did, the ACC network did a brilliant thing where they commissioned a history of the ACC. People loved it. Guess where they ran it? On the ACC network. Yeah. They're going to sell that stuff. They're going to probably, do. And now look, the ACC. What's next? Do we do one on just Duke UNC? Do we, they got to hit.
The story of the Steph Curry family, maybe, because that's an interesting story. There's a bunch of ideas, but they have no connection to music at all. Why would any producer worth their salt sign with the Golden State Warriors, and be locked into the Warriors for no reason? K-pop randomly out of thin air. I don't know. I think it's stupid.
Yeah. And K-pop doesn't need the Golden State Warriors, by the way. It's got a perfectly fine money-generating international brand. It does not need the Golden State Warriors' help.
Oh yeah, yes. K-pop is huge without the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah. They're not the power. They're not the power person here. So yeah, I think we went from interesting to smart to dumb. In terms of, how different leagues. We didn't really look at Major League Baseball in this. We'll probably give us some interesting examples here coming up over the next few months. But we did sort of talk about how they got labor peace, and their economics are actually pretty strong as we start to see, coming out. So you start to see how these other leagues start to perform in the margins. But that's what it is.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think it's interesting to see if baseball goes down this road too. Because baseball has an international market, but they don't have a great market. That's the thing. Japan has a thriving baseball market, and they're the Japanese Baseball League and then the Korean Baseball League. I don't know if the MLB will ever be able to make inroads there. And the other place is Central and South America, which isn't a moneyed place where Major League Baseball would make a lot of inroads. So I don't know. of all these things we talked about, I continue to believe that the NHL first, NBA second, have an opportunity to expand more beyond the American borders, and then baseball third and NFL last. That's kind of how I see it as a big picture thing. You?
I would agree. I think there's not that. I think ultimately there's a sort of slivers of difference in those top three, and then a gulf between 3 and 4.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
So I guess we'd be remiss with not doing at least a Snyder update. And that's what I'm calling these. I'm not calling it Washington. I know that this is I'm not saying that's correct, right, or analytical, but that's how I'm referring to it. But there's more. Even if you really just hold your nose and your breath and try to just follow this team, it's hard.
Yeah, so again, we can't ever get away with this. We tried, but here we are. So the latest thing in the Snyder scandals is that the team responded to the Jason Friedman allegations, which I believe we talked about on the last show, I think. Yeah, I've slept since then. But you guys know what I'm talking about. And the team submitted apparently 20 pages to the FTC that bashed Jason Friedman. Jason Friedman is the guy who went to Congress and said that the team is carrying two sets of books, one to show the NFL and one to hide a bunch of income from the NFL. And the team, of course, character assassinated him and said he's untrustworthy and he was mean, he was ugly to women, and why should you trust him? Just terrorize this guy, which should surprise no one. If you didn't expect that from Dan Snyder, you haven't been paying attention for 25 years. This is classic Dan Snyder. So we haven't really got a response necessarily from the FTC or anything about it, but they're going to make Friedman's life miserable. They will. And in terms of the FTC, I still am. I still haven't done it. I said on the Hog side last week that I was going to ask a corporate lawyer this because I don't see how the FTC has any jurisdiction whatsoever over a private, closely held corporation. So I don't think they do have jurisdiction over them, but I will ask and find out. But that's kind of the latest update. Chris, do you have any non-bile induced thoughts? Or bile? Go ahead and throw that out too.
No, I mean you got to manage yourself on that, right? So it's just got the thing that scares me honestly about this. So I think, as everyone knows, I'm on team whatever I'm team Machiavelli for whatever gets Snyder out of here, right? Like whatever tricks. I don't, the government already doesn't work on so many levels how it's even remotely supposed to. So sure, let them take out Snyder, yay. But this has just gotten boring. And I think that's actually the problem, right? Because it's just enough to stay salacious and never enough to take them out. And so we're in the worst of all possible worlds. My boy Pangloss, for those of you Candide fans.
Candide, throwing out a reference right there.
So
I like it.
Actually, he was best of all possible worlds, but then they look at the duality. We're in the worst possible worlds because we can't escape the sludge, and the sludge never takes the trash out. So it's just this fire hose of disgusting nonsense, horribleness. You can't even just enjoy the football on any remote level. It's horrific. And I just think now what we're seeing is that status quo is going to just keep on for a while. None of this will take them out, and you can't even for 2 days just like be interested in the actual game of football for the Washington standpoint without a Snyder story, and it's exhausting.
Yeah, I think you're right in that if it was bad enough, the momentum would have been building in the NFL, and we would have heard about it. That Snyder needs to go, and that hasn't happened, yet at least. So yeah, it's not really a fire hose; it's kind of an oozing sludge.
Right. Slower moving.
Yeah, it's exactly right. It's like your bathroom is overflowing, but it's just a tiny leak. You need to fix it, but you haven't because it's a small leak, but it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. At some point, your bathroom's going to blow up. That we're not at the point where the bathroom's blown up. We just have to deal with the stinky toilet.
Or The bathroom's blown up many times and no one seems to care.
Yeah, it's full of poop at this point,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
everybody's just wading through it.
So, I don't know, and where I'm just saying it's sort of boring now in a way is just because then now it's got predictably annoying R versus D aspect to it. You do have it bouncing around federal bureaucracy in ways that don't make complete sense. You got so many different versions of he said she said going on and all across all the scandals, which just after a while becomes dizzying. Like it's so much whose reality do we want to accept. It's got all the hallmarks of modern society right here in this one Shakespearean play.
Oh yeah, and we didn't want to spend too much time on it because we're tired of talking about it, and we just had a few minutes. We thought we'd update you, but I've said what I'm going to say. The end.
All right. So what are you excited about, Steve, to cover about the Washington team on the Hogsty?
Oh, not much. So the Hogsty, we are about to go into draft mode. Obviously, this week we will have a show on Monday, but we'll record it after the draft so we can get all that latest draft news. Exciting. I assume Rick Snyder's Seasons of Discontent will do a show post draft. He normally does, but he doesn't often tell us until it's the bitter last second. So we'll have to see, but I would look for that. And then we've got all of our regular written content.
Well, there you go. So by the time you listen to this, you will know, you will see who and what of your mock drafts were correct.
I've done none.
Same. There's 0 mock drafts produced on It's Just Business. So see you in
Exactly.
2 weeks.